Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for the last leg of today before we are allowed to go to dinner. I have the great pleasure now to introduce a speaker, and I shortly introduced myself to him because I said, you don't me, but I know you. And the reason for that was that actually every time I'm asked, who would be a great speaker on the topic of food security, I normally recommend him. So he was just in Rome where he was on a panel where I recommended him, and today he's here. I'm talking about Hans Herren. His CV in the program, which I don't want to go completely over, it covers a lot of room, and that's very fair that it covers a lot of room because he has done quite a lot. And I think his greatest achievement, beyond many which are listed there, is that he designed a biological control program to fight the cassava mealybug. And that is estimated to have saved some 20 million lives in Africa and to avoid a major food crisis. And we are talking about food security here. And to have an expert actually who was able to manage this risk, I think is really great. For this achievement, he got many awards also for his other stuff. The most important thing, and I think that's right to say, was the Right Livelihood Award, which is also called the Alternative Nobel Prize. And I'm now very pleased that Hans Herren will share with us his thoughts on food security in the sense of biodiversity as the key to food and nutrition security. Hans, can I call you up to the podium?
Oh, it works. Good. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, friends from Switzerland, but also from beyond. I just met people from Kenya. Very nice to see some friends from where I've worked quite a bit. So it's a very pleasure to be here. So I want to thank the organizer of this conference for the invitation, and also Bernd for the introduction. So I was asked to discuss a little bit the issue of biodiversity and sort of how does it link to the issue of nutrition, food and nutrition security. And as you will see, there's many, many connections which quite often are sort of forgotten in the quest of producing more, but not always better. No. So I'll speak a little bit about food and nutrition, the changing environment. Things are changing. The whole discussion, the conversation on agriculture and food is changing, fortunately, maybe due to some pressures, but also, I think, to some more mounting evidence that we need to make a change. And I will talk something which goes from the 1992, which is probably remembered at the original Rio conference, to the one we just had in 2012. So that has been a period of big change. The connection between diet and sustainable agriculture and food systems. So, what are the connections in there, and what do we need to work on? And also challenges and solutions for the transformation, because clearly we need a transformation. We cannot only just work a little bit at the corners of the system. It requires a major overhaul of the way we grow our food, but also the way we consume. So basically sort of the circular system. So I like to go back usually to this famous report here, which I hope every one of you has read, the International Assessment of Agricultural Knowledge, Science and Technology for Development. It's a big, long-term name, for short the ISTAD, published in 2009, in the spring of 2009, the work of 400 people, almost 6 years in the working with authors from about 52 countries, and more than 400 people have been writing on this. So just to give you the background to know where are we now sort of moving to and why are we changing. And at that time, we really tried to address 4 key questions in this report: issue of hunger and poverty, issue of the livelihoods, rural livelihoods, issue of improving nutrition and human health. That was already then a big topic, and also facilitating this environmentally, socially equitable and economically sustainable development. So how can we actually move in all the 3 dimensions of sustainable development? Not only just one or the other, but basically together with creating synergies and taking a more holistic approach to our food system. So these were the questions we answered, and we came forward with a number of very interesting, I think, suggestions at the time already. But you know, because many people sat basically on their behind for all the time, spending a lot of time criticizing the report, writing new reports, watering down the key messages of our report. So we now have actually a much bigger job to do. And not the least because climate change is moving. We made many, many recommendations already back then about it. The population is growing, the demand is changing. We have more and more inequities in the world, which very much affect this whole topic, and a shrinking of the natural resources, and also energy issues, more costs, less available. So all these are now things which are really impinging on our food production. And nutrition also, obviously. So, where are the problems coming from, and why do we need to change? We need to change because the system, as it is now, sort of a green revolution, high input type of agriculture, is based on non-sustainable practices. And it starts, I think there's a, okay, so the increase of production is due to use of more and more nitrogen, although it's maybe flattening out a little bit here because of the price issue, phosphorus, more water, and water is, as you know, limited, or limiting factor in many places, more and more. And obviously pesticide use, which is still increasing if you put all together the pesticides, fungicides, herbicides. So all this is still growing despite some new farming practices which were meant at the beginning actually to use less. But it's the contrary which is happening, and all the data are there for anyone to go look at. So that's obviously a system which we cannot continue. So we need to change. And we need to change the basic paradigm of this type of agriculture. That's important. The paradigm, the report has asked for a paradigm change. And basically, we have sort of a brown agriculture. That's where we're going with the plow, which is the dumbest invention for humanity, I think. And we need to go to an agriculture which is much more green, where we don't have to plow, where we have the soil covered for many different reasons. Just less CO2 up in the air, for example, but many, many others. And I think we have already good practices. There's ways of doing this also without heavy chemical inputs. And there are farmers in the US who actually have now found out, they have developed new machinery so that you have less use of herbicides, because that's a very high cost, never mind the environmental and the health problems linked with it. Also, it's an issue of resistance and not having new solutions. As you know, we have a lot of problems right now in those fields. With conservation agriculture, so the need to move on already there too. So one thing we have to understand is that when people say we need more food, okay, what exactly are we meaning? Because today we grow 4,600 calories per person per day. So this has to be really entering the brains of the people out there, in particular of our people in the policy making environment. So when we grow enough food today for 14 billion people, then we don't need more. I think what we need really is more food in certain areas, different type of foods, grown differently than today, and also by different people. So that's what we need. So we need a rearrangement of the food production systems. This is what we require. And someplace in the world, we're going to grow less, and we're going to grow better. We don't need to grow more and more and more in certain places. It's not up to America or up to Europe, or maybe some, or taken now also Eastern Europe, or even Brazil or Argentina, to feed the world. Countries need to move to a new paradigm where we try to grow as much food as possible, more locally, of better quality, and of more diversity. And we don't talk about feeding here, we talk about nourishing. We nourish the people and also nurture the planet. Right now we feed the people, like animals, look at how many obese people we have around the place, and basically we reap the world. So that's not a way forward. So in the end, between 2,000 and 2,500 calories end up in the people's plate, because some of them actually from the animal end up down here too. But when you look at why we have so much food and we basically eat only so much, it's because we have this problem with losses and waste. In developing countries, we produce Quite a bit, but we lose a lot. 40% in average, pre and post-harvest. Doesn't have to be. We know exactly what to do to solve that problem. Then you have in the developed countries, we have a lot of the food here is wastage. There's almost no waste here, it's just losses. And why is this possible? It's because food is simply too cheap. If you have read the paper this morning, is it coming now? You probably all have seen, I was in Geneva this morning, so I got the French version here, where you can see that the Swiss throw away 2 million tons of food per year. But when you pay only 8% of your income for food, who cares? And that means how much money per household? Something like 500 to 1,000 francs. Big deal. So you can see that, this is symptomatic of what exactly needs to change. And this is because today is the World Food Day, you all know, and I think we need to watch much better what we do. But clearly, that has to change. And then we look around the world about nutrition. So where are the big deficiencies? So on the nutrition, we have undernutrition, again, in Africa, some India, in highly populated areas. Vitamin A deficiencies in almost the same places. So we have really a problem of inequity, because that people just cannot buy their food. They already spend 50% or more of their income for food. So this is not the problem in our place. So again, I think we need to think about, what is behind the problem. Behind the problem, again, as I said, a lot of inequity issues. So why sustainable and a biodiverse food system? I think they're connected. If it's diverse, if it's biodiverse, I think we're much better off. Because today, the new calculation, the report just was presented to us on Monday in Rome at the CFS. So FAO presented this new data. So now we went from 840 to 800 million undernourished people. So we lost 40 million en route in the last 12 months, which is good. Is the calculus right? Is another question. We still have now this 1.5 billion obese and growing, and 20 million diabetes type 2 cases and growing. So clearly we have a health problem here in our food system, which we need to deal with. And that has a lot to do with what we eat, when we eat it, for example. We have also an energy problem. We know that we use more calories than we produce, so that eventually is not sustainable. We also have the issue of climate change, because the way the food system is organized is actually creating more problem for itself. And just not the least because of what's happening here. We have soil degradation. 20 million hectares a year are gone because of bad practices, plowing, for example, but many others. Overuse of fertilizer, pesticides, that all kills life in the soil, which is so important. Biodiversity loss, which is enormous, and also natural resource problems. So again, we need to manage better with our resource, and I'll show you why in a minute. And again, the industrial agriculture has basically emptied our landscape from the people, and we need to deal with this, because we have a huge social problem coming onto us already here, with many, many jobless people everywhere in the world, not only in the developing countries. And with 2.5 billion or 3 billion more people by the end of the century, we need jobs also in agriculture, because agriculture should be the top job in the world, not the lowest job in the world as is today. It is not respected. The farmers are not respected. If you throw away food the farmer has grown the hard way and you throw it in the bin, that's lack of respect for hard work, because you did not even pay properly for those products. So I think we need to put the system back into shape, into the right place. We have a problem with our planetary boundaries, and I just want to look at here at the biodiversity, which is what the topic here. We have lost more than 50% in the last, 40 years now. If we go on like this, we're going to have even more losses, because that's not even going back, it's even going in the wrong direction. Never mind the nitrogen, you see, we are way beyond the safe limits here, way beyond. And we are going still in the wrong direction. Despite the fact that some farmers and some people are trying to use less nitrogen now, at least in the developed countries, we're still going in the wrong direction. Phosphorus, actually almost everywhere, the direction of movement of the trends right now are still in the wrong way. So I think we need to really change all this, and agriculture has a big role to play there. I think just a few days ago, the new report came out, Global Footprint Network and WWF have a new report, and I just picked that picture from them just to show, where we are really having a problem with, is the wrong button, greenhouse gases. And because the industrial agriculture produces nearly 50% of the greenhouse gases, by the time you add the deforestation, the way we deal with our land, the transportation, and the waste, all added up, contribute about half to these greenhouse gases here, which are what's going up in the carbon up in the air. So how long can we do that? And you can see even that the cropland part is going up, and that's also why, is because of the way we treat our land. So clearly, we need to do something about agriculture, because our footprint in agriculture is just way too high. And when we don't do anything about it, we're going to suffer not only less yields, because we know plants are very affected by higher temperature, and I don't think that all the genetic engineering will solve that problem, because it's much more complicated than a few genes here and there. So I think we need to deal on the other end. We need to solve the problem, the cause, and not just work on the symptoms all the time. And if we don't do anything, you can see here, calculations show that we're going to have less nutrients in our food as we move to higher CO2 levels moving forward. And it doesn't look like there's any going backwards on the CO2 production, right? As far as I know, as far as I can see, and as far as the measurements show. So here we are having actually less nutritious food. So I think we need to think about that much harder. So let's go back and see, okay, what's happening out there? So in Rio, all the countries in the world agreed on a declaration. And in this declaration, there were a number of statements made that food security and nutrition has become a pressing global challenge. That was already now 2012. Okay, we're sitting around, we're talking, having conferences about doing something. Are we really doing all what we can? No, we are not yet. We're still talking. We're still debating on what should we be doing, when we know already what the direction should be. In 2009, there's a report of 2,000 pages who lined out exactly what the kind of policies we need to change. They were fought very strongly by the industry. They actually quit the whole process over it, because we said what needs to be done. They didn't like it. So they're working now basically on the other side of the spectrum. They also rated the importance of empowering rural women. We need to change also with whom we work out there. If 70% of the farmers are women, maybe we need to start to include them in our research, in what we do. And we need to also address the cause of excessive food price volatility. That's also a big issue. And why do we have this volatility? Because we don't have resilient systems. Because we allow people to use food as commodity and trade them. It should be forbidden. It's criminal actually to trade with food. Food is a human right. If people trade with something else, who cares? Gravel, we don't need it to live, but not with food. So I think we need to put things straight again. And then there was statement on biodiversity too. With the severity of global biodiversity loss, degradation of ecosystems, they undermine global development and affect food security and nutrition. And you saw before on the planetary boundaries how we deal with biodiversity. So again, I think there we need to think harder and make the changes we require. So what are the challenges then we look forward and the solutions? So first of all, business as usual is not an option. We need a paradigm change. And again, that has not sunk in. The most of the programs which are developed right now to help the world deal with agriculture and food are actually just, I can call them Green Revolution 2.0. And that's wrong, because we said that's the wrong direction. 400 people said this is the wrong direction. So why are we still continuing in that same direction? With little changes here and there. Oh yes, oh now we do this, we use less fertilizer. And so that's only doing things at the margin which will not change the system, the food system. We use a lot of land in agriculture. We don't have to. We actually could, if you do it right, we can even use less land. They leave more land for biodiversity, for example. The world also has more smallholder farmers. They produce more per unit area than the large farms. So why do you want to get rid of them? Proven. It's the year of the family farm and the smaller farmers this year, the idea. There's a lot of new data who came out to say how much they produce, how much of the contribution to the food system they produce. And sustainable agriculture, so if you look forward, it includes in the economic, the social, and the environmental dimensions, not only the economic one. And actually with false economics, as you know. So basically, sustainable and a biodiverse agriculture food systems are key for sustainable development. And we need to develop sustainably all over the world, not only in developing countries. The Sustainable Development Goals, which are being worked out right now, will be applied to everybody. They are universal. So we better get ready also here to change the way we do food. So we need to stop thinking linear. This is the quarterly report arrangement we have now. That's not the future. The future is thinking in systems. Everything is connected, everything goes around, what comes around. So I think we have to think. So we need to think in dimension. So we have these different domains or dimension. And you can see that the biggest circle where we are all in, and which we don't care about very much, is the ecological, the environment. We are part of it. We are not outside. We are not sitting out here and controlling it. The social domain, that's where we are, and the economic, it's the smallest. It has to be the smallest. We cannot make the economy bigger than the environment, because we need the environment to live in. And we can translate this into this. That was a result of that report where we say that, okay, we have these three dimensions, and they need to go together. So we have, again, the social, economic, environment. And if you put everything together, that's where you end up actually with the sustainable food production. Everyone has to contribute their share and their part. And then we're going to have an equitable, a livable, and a viable world. But not if you just concentrate here, or only there. So I think we need to bring the pieces together. We have to start to think about all the ecosystem services. We can't continue to kill our bees. The bees are important. And what do we do out there? We keep killing them. Oh, we're going to give them a little band of land somewhere with a few flowers. That's not enough. We need more. We need to understand that it's a life-supporting system we have out there, and we have to actually maintain it. Actually, we have to restore it. So everything is connected, everything. And so again, you see, we use inputs here, but if we were to do more of that one here, we can minimize on this side here. Those external input should be and can be minimized. Maybe not to zero, because we are messing about with the system by growing food, we know that. But again, that's to minimize and to make these things here in a way that they don't disturb the system really, but that they help it. And everything is a circle. And that's how it looks like. So if you have the plant production, don't worry, the details, this down here, plant calorie production, you can see this connects with many things. Energy sector, health issues, population, migrations, global warming. Everything is connected and complex and connected. So if you just think you can do a little few modification somewhere in the plant genome and this problem is solved, forget it. It is complicated. That's why we need new research, which takes into account the system as a whole, and not just a piece of it. So we need new ways of doing our research too. And the young people in here, think ahead when you look about, so think about working together in teams who deal with sometimes beyond agriculture. Because I think part of the biggest problem we have in the food system actually beyond the actual food system. So we need to do this transition. So we want to transition from where we are here, for example, the conventional productivity system, to something more agroecological systems, which are sustainable. But the transition goes down a little bit. You know, we cannot just go straight across. Depends where you are. It could. So it comes at a cost. And that cost has to be carried, and we'll show you actually that this is all possible. So we want to move. But there's also another realization here which comes, is that this is actually circular also, and unless we start to bring the consumer in here, and look at what diets they have, we won't go where we need to go. So we need more diversity in our system, and we know that. We have lost crops, we can do that. Instead of just having a few crops, we want more diversity, and I will show you in a minute or so what comes. This is not the solution, you know, like vitamin A rice versus other rice. Just as an example, we need to change our food, the way we consume. And here you can see this is sort of what we do now. Has a very high footprint, a lot of meat, that's a very broad footprint, and we should be over here. So we need to change our diet patterns. And if we change our diets, the farmer can also grow something else. So they can start to grow many crops, have multiple rotations, different rotations, but not if people want to eat only polenta or chips, for example. Okay? So it's connected. But I'm not sure this is something which people have very understood. We need to have fair prices. As long as Europe and North America produce food which is subsidized, ends up in the market down south, which is much, much cheaper than what they produce, just forget that we will have a real system around the world. So again, I think we need to make those changes also. Can it be done? Do we have examples? We got plenty of them. This is one. This is maize. Back. This is maize grown without nitrogen fertilizer. Okay, the nitrogen is made by these plants here. This is desmodium, a legume. And because we grow it, there's actually no more weeds either. And then the soil keeps moisture. So whenever there's a drought, this is green, gets all dry, and etc. So actually, this is a system. There's many more versions of this and others, complex systems which deal with the problematic. It deals also with insects, repelling the bad bugs, attracting the good ones. And that's really done because these maize varieties here are old farmers' varieties. They have this capacity. These are plants which are not lazy. They're plants who can go look for their own nutrients deep down. They can protect for their pests themselves, and that's all even published in Nature. So this is all science which is available. We bring the animals back on the farm so that you close the nutrient cycle, important. Also, we need more life in the soil, not less. We have destroyed our life. The biota in the soil is very important. We have destroyed it. It needs to be go back. More compost. We need to bring all the food waste from the cities has to go back all to the land. Sorry, you can't just throw it on the big bin somewhere. And maybe beyond, all the human waste eventually has to be dealt with. You cannot have those mega cities and just everything goes down to the ocean. So we need, I think this is a paradigm change, as you can see. We need also biodiversity above ground. Okay, you heard before introduction. This is the insect which saved a crop in Africa. 20 billion people for $12 million. It costs $136 billion to make a GMO. We have a lot of pest problems we could solve doing the right thing. Are we doing it? No. That doesn't make any money for anybody. Or maybe a little bit for some biocontrol people, but it's not really this, it's permanent control of pests. We need our bees. We cannot just do without them. Maybe people think of creating artificial insects, you know, they're already working on those nanotechnology thing. Well, maybe you're going to send them out there. Well, I don't know if it's really, you know, people are having all kinds of ideas. Just read Wired magazine. That's where you can read that stuff. So do we want that? We can decide. GMOs, that's actually less biodiversity, not more. And why? It's because in the US, between 1995 and 2011, these were, here, that was 100% of the varieties available. This is what's today. You can go to soybeans, same thing. That's what the farmers actually have available to plant now. So we are actually destroying diversity. And here, the numbers. Industrial agriculture, 12 crops, 80,000 varieties versus 7,000 and 2 million for the smallholder farmer. In the animals, same thing. So what do you think is going to be more resilient when we move forward? This is the number of varieties available. So we have lost many. This is 100 years ago, and this is today. That's not what we want or the way we can move forward. So again, when you look at agriculture, the change will need education, a different type of research, a lot of dissemination of information which is already available, and clearly also work out new knowledge. So we need to link the farmers' knowledge with the best science and the best technologies to create the innovations which will make the change. And I think this is valid, again, around the world and not only in developing countries. And, okay, almost finished. So can it be done? If you implement what was recommended in this ag report, the IACD, so basically 4 major issues: losses, reduce losses, do better management practices, more research with farmers, less losses in food processing. So you can see that basically you produce by 2050, by investing only 140 billion, Switzerland wastes 2.5 billion a year in food, okay? That's already, we put that in there already. So if you do go green, you actually produce more calories than if you go brown. You use less forest, you destroy less forest, you use less land, you much less water, the soil quality is improved, employment is higher, and production is higher. So this is green, business as usual, and we say business as usual is not the way forward. And so to conclude, a number of points maybe. So we promote sustainable biodiverse agricultural methods and also systems. Not everywhere it will be the same. So we need to localize the food systems, including the research and implementation. Family farmers need to be helped because these are the stalwart of food production today and tomorrow. We need to produce policies which again provide smallholder with legal rights. The land issue is a huge problem, access to land. If you want to farm in Switzerland, let's say you want to start a farm here. If you have not inherited the farm, you may be in big trouble because I don't think you can pay for it. In many places in the world, it's the same thing. We need full cost of accounting. We cannot continue to have cheap food, which actually puts all the externalities onto society. Obesity, diabetes, dirty water, CO2 in the air. Now, if you, the cheap food of today, the food grown under the industrial system would actually account for all its costs, it will be about 3 times as costly probably as organic or bio or sustainably produced food. So again, we need to see this, we need to work on it. The policy environment has to be changed. We need new policies. We're going to the Sustainable Development Goals now. Important to have really strong goals and targets. That's now our last option to make the change. So let's work on it. But what do people do now? They try to dilute them already. And again, I think we need public investments in research and development, reorient that research, total reorientation, and also education from kindergarten up, have people think in systems and not linear, then we're going to have people who understand that things are connected. Today, people don't. And we need to have new and better institutions. So not create new ones only, shut down the ones that don't work and start with new ones, but not the ones which they just started on climate smart agriculture. I think that's actually an insult to the rest of agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Talking about a global overview on the topic of food security, I think there's tons of food for thought in that presentation, and I'm nearly sure that there are a lot of people who want to make a statement, ask a question, so please raise your hands. We may start with the lady in the back, then we go to Willem over there.
Hi, I'm Danielle Tendel from ETH Zurich. Mr. Herren, thank you very much for that list of things we should be doing. The fact is that we aren't really doing these things. They haven't happened. Why aren't they happening? There's a huge inertia in the system. I think you will agree to that with me. So one question I would like to ask you, and I didn't see that in your presentation, so maybe you can complete that. Who has the momentum to make such transformational changes in our system? It's not just happening. We have the solutions there, so why is it not happening, and who can make this happen?
So we need to get the dinosaurs out of the way, which actually are the vested interests. And they're standing in the way of change. They're monopolizing the discussion. They're monopolizing our institutions and also our money. We need to get the governments back into the driver's seats of agriculture. The governments have abdicated their role and their obligations toward the people. Because if food is a human right, you cannot live in the hands only of the private sector. And you know what the tendency is now is to shift more and more. We have no money, let the private sector do it. They have their role to play, actually a fairly large role to play, but not in certain areas. And certainly not the leading role, not the guiding role in terms of agriculture and food system. That's why the SDGs, which is something to be negotiated by government, would be very important that it is done right. So let's put all the vested interests to the side for a while and move with what we know already should be done, because we scientists, actually many of us, do have the evidence that it can be done, and that we can grow plenty food of quality, affordable, in the short, medium and long term. And I think also having those plans for the longer term is very important too. But in the way right now, I can see exactly who is standing there, big elephant, private sector in particular, in some private sectors, and also because the private sector is now funding universities. So even there you have half the people who are dependent on the private sector for their living. So what do you think they're going to come up with? You know, I think we need to really, again, you cannot leave food and food security in the hands, in the control of the private sector, because they have, in our system, and that's where we live, they need to make money. That's fine. But they don't really look very much for the long term, unless they are family businesses, which is different. There's many very good ones there.
Willem? The microphone is coming over there.
Willem Gruss from ETH Zurich. Dr. Herren, thanks a lot for your inspiring talk. I mean, I think we all agree that we need disruptive changes. I think that's clear. But we also should keep a few facts straight, and that is that in agriculture we had the highest loss of diversity in the 60s and 70s, last century. And that was after the introduction of the new crop varieties. Norman Borlaug was one of the drivers of these varieties, and that was long before there were GMOs in the market. I mean, if you look at India alone, you know, from the 100,000 rice varieties that were grown in India, within 15 years, farmers adopted new varieties. So why do farmers do that? Because farmers are economists. They do what they need to do to survive. So that's number one. Number two, you know, I mean, if we think about diversity, I'm not talking about, this is diversity in the agriculture section. If we think about now biodiversity, a BT cornfield has higher biodiversity than a conventional cornfield that is sprayed with pesticides. I mean, there are a number of studies that have been made. This is fact, okay? Farmers with new varieties, including GMO varieties, have adopted no-tilling systems. That preserves biodiversity in the soil, okay? GMO crops have been adopted by farmers at a rate that is unprecedented in agriculture. So why do millions, over 100 million of farmers, why do they do that? If the technology is so bad, if we are damaging the environments, why do farmers do that? Do you have an answer for that?
Well, there's multiple answers, and sure, I mean, if you sort of look at quickly over the system, that's the conclusion you would come to. But when the change of those varieties early in the Green Revolution was also linked to use of fertilizer. Because that's actually, the variety had contributed some to the yield increase, okay, made the home shorter, they produce more, but then you actually start to look, what did we produce more? We produce more starch, not more nutrients. And there's, again, peer-reviewed papers which show exactly that in many of these varieties, now we have more yield, more kilograms per hectare, but we don't have more health per hectare, or more, so again, what's the net benefit here? We have created diseases, obesity and other things with that. We could have done it differently way back then already. We could have actually bred varieties in different systems, because we know, and I know I worked in Africa long enough to know, and we showed it in our experimenting, that you can increase yields, you can double, quadruple yields without, I mean, this push-pull, for example, but there's many others, where if you take care of the soil fertility properly, you produce more. And you know the SRI system right now, again, in those systems, they can use local varieties, well adapted, and they would out-yield even hybrids. So you see, it's more complex than just, oh, we have a new seed, produce more. Because those seeds are now very dependent. They are sort of lazy varieties which would fertilizer. I mean, I have a farm in California, vineyard. What's happening now there? The drought. So what's happening? Now they have to uproot all their grapes because they bred grapes with surface roots. Oh, plenty water, fertilizer, you grow a lot. Now things change. You have to uproot and go back to the deep-rooted plants. And we need to actually think about this. High yield is not the only thing we need. We can produce enough food and nutrition for the world in systems which are not maximized but optimized. And I think what we have done a lot in the green revolution, we have been just maximizing. Oh, how much can we put more in? I mean, look at the fertilizer used in Thailand. They put it in there until they could not get any more yields, until actually the soil was destroyed partly and yields go down. You know, there's a limit there. So we have pushed the system too long in the wrong direction. And although we even knew, and you know, the opportunity cost of all this has been enormous. Because we were omnibulated somehow by saying, oh, more fertilizer, nitrogen, we can produce more. Yeah, this is great. Only if you look just at a few indicators, but not at the whole indicators, environmental, but also the social, the health issues, inequity, which this has created. We have created huge social problems with this. So just to say, you know, it's very complex. So you can take each piece and probably be right, but put them together and you'll see that we have a problem. And actually we do have a problem. If not, I will not be here talking, you will not be here listening.
One point before you start, Willem. I think there was maybe another hand up before on that side of the... yeah, only because, I mean, that we have a little bit variety. Was there somebody on that side? If not, then Willem could ask his question. Yeah, the lady over there, please.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I'm Sheila from Kenya. And the issue of carbon trade, it's a major concern to biodiversity, especially back in Africa. And bearing in mind that with time that has diverse effects on our biodiversity, which in turn affects the food security. So what can be done to curb this? Because if it continues in the same way, then by the year 2050, we'll be talking of lacking food completely in Africa. And right now we heavily depend on food aid from US and some European countries. So what can be done? And bearing in mind also that the common citizens, we don't have a voice. It's only the government to say. So what can be done on this?
All right, giving the people a voice, the farmer a voice, that's important. And actually in Kenya it's happening because of a project which is funded by the Swiss government, IFAD and a few others, which we carry out between the Biovision Foundation, Millennium Institute and other partners to bring multi-stakeholders together to discuss agricultural policies for the country. So now that everybody's on the table, the private sector, the farmers, which are also private sector, development partners, government, civil society groups. So we are all discussing there. We're providing you tools about, how can we move forward, for more sustainability, less inequity, and also adaptation. And actually, Kenya has actually worked already on climate change adaptation using simulation models to look at, what to do where to deal with this and increase resilience, for example. So that's actually happening right now in Kenya. So we are sort of lucky that at least something's happening. But with what's happening in Kenya, also this whole decentralization may make things quite difficult, because I don't know how a central government will really then tell all these governors what to do in order to really change the food. But Kenya, for example, and again, we have been working there long enough, you could be food self-sufficient already since years back, if we were to do the right things, exporting food if you wanted to, or certainly nourishing your people well. But you know, there's a push worldwide for more and more maize. I call it the maisification of the world. And it's a total disaster. We need diversity out there. And again, also in Kenya, you know, you need to go away from eating ugali all the time. I think we have to have a more diverse diet, and that will increase the resilience in the farms too. So I think, you know, it's all connected. And you cannot sort of take away that the consumers have a big impact on what farmers do and how they produce also, depending on how much you want to pay for the food.
Wonderful. I have good news, because we will have 20 more minutes where you can ask questions actually to all presenters for today, because we have Hans Herren here, Mary Anderson is still sitting in front, and Mario Haser and Alex Tobler also here. But for the moment, we want to put Mr. Herren back in his seat so that he can relax and he gets his little present first. And we have a quick reminder of what happened today from two young students. First of all, an applause for Mr. Herren, by the way.